Hi folks, we're just giving everyone a few seconds to get logged in before we get started here. If you are already logged in, you can check the chat for some information about how to buy tonight's featured books from our poets and how to get 15% off those books when you buy within the next week. Good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. We're excited to host tonight's event with Zoe Hidsig for her new poetry collection, Mezzanine. Fellow poets Rachel Eliza Griffiths, author of Seeing the Body, and Nick Flynn, author of Stay, join Hitzig in readings of their own work and conversation, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone for making this happen and to all of you for showing up. Greenlight storefronts are currently closed and locked, but our community is still here. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things. First, you can see and hear the speakers, but they cannot see or hear you. They will see your name over in our attendee list and when you comment in chat or ask questions in our audience Q&A. If you scroll over the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see a couple of functions we'll be using throughout the event. One of them is labeled chat. You can open this window to comment on the reading or the conversations, say hello to the authors or to your fellow attendees, or provide applause after readings or during high points in the conversation. You'll also see at the bottom of your Zoom window an icon labeled Q&A. This is where we'll be pulling questions from for the audience Q&A portion towards the end of our event. You can type your questions in here at any point during tonight's conversation. And if you see someone else's question that you would really like to hear answered, you can go ahead and upvote that. And the questions with the most likes will float towards the top of our queue as we're pulling questions to ask tonight's authors. We are recording tonight's event, so look for video or audio versions on our website and social channels later on. Tonight's featured books are available for sale from greenlightbookstore.com. Though our stores are closed, we're working with our supplier warehouse for fast direct-to-home shipping. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured books is a great way to show your support. And we're offering 15% off on the featured books when you purchase them from Greenlight's website this week. Look for that coupon code in the chat. Each author is going to start us off with a reading, and then they'll be talking with each other and with all of you. Our first reader tonight is Nick Flynn. He has worked as a ship's captain, an electrician, and a caseworker for homeless adults. Some of the venues his poems, essays, and nonfiction have appeared in include The New Yorker, The Nation, The Paris Review, The New York Times Book Review, and NPR's This American Life. His writing has won awards from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Library of Congress, Penn, and the Fine Arts Work Center, among other organizations. His film credits include artistic collaborator and field poet on Darwin's Nightmare, nominated for an Academy Award for Best Feature Documentary in 2006, as well as executive producer and artistic collaborator on Being Flynn, the film version of his memoir, Another Bullshit Night in Suck City. He's part of the creative writing faculty at the University of Houston, where each spring he teaches workshops in poetry, creative nonfiction, and interdisciplinary art. He lives in Brooklyn with his wife and his daughter. His work has been translated into 15 languages. In his new book, Stay, Flynn presents a self-portrait via a constellation of topics that have circled his work, showing in this mixed media retrospective that nothing is created in isolation. Nick, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. That was a long introduction. Sorry about that. I'm so happy to be here with Zoe and Eliza to celebrate their books. I guess it's Zoe's night with Mezzanine. This is your book launch, right, Zoe? So I'm really, really honored to be here. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And I know that Eliza's book came out last week, just a few days ago, Seeing the Body, which is another amazing book. I'm just honored to be in your presence. So I'll just read a little bit. We decided we were going to show some images, and we're going to sort of look at this through a lens of protest, our reading tonight. So we thought about that. We've been discussing this for a few days. So we decided to figure out, each of us decided how we would approach that idea of protest. So I'm going to show you an image, and I'm going to read a little bit from my image. Oh, I have to hit this button. Sorry. Thanks. Okay, here we are. Okay, this is a page from the book Stay. This book that shows collaborations with various artists that I've worked with over the years. This is a film still from an artist, Gabriel Martinez. So I'll read this first while we start out. It's a poem. This is an excerpt of my poem, AK-47. AK-47. A phone rings in a labyrinth. This house you grew out of, you grew up inside it. Inside this house, a gun was cocked, uncocked, picked up, put down, aimed, lowered. And yes, each of us is born with a gun on the wall. Yes, a gun in the closet, a gun in our hands, a gun to our heads. You cannot say it has always been this way, but it has been this way for a long, yes, a long, long time. And this way it is now. And the path each bullet makes through the air means only one thing. I am, I am, I am, I am, I am. We could melt it down, could we? Into nails or bells or railroad tracks or a tin cup or a steel toe or a spool of wire or a shovel or a leg brace or a ladder or a bedpan or scaffolding or a sewing needle or a typewriter or a hammer or a crutch or brake pads or a tiny crucifix. I'll leave this up for a second. I'm going to read another poem from this is from my book, I Will Destroy You. It's called See Through. This poem is, the book came out in September, and this poem is has a note to it in the back. It says, in 2016 in Charlotte, North Carolina, Keith Lamont Scott, a 43-year-old father, became the 194th black person killed by the police in the United States that year. See Through. Somewhere in Carolina, a video plays on endless loop to show whether the man waiting in his truck for his daughter to get out of school that day was holding onto a book or holding onto a gun. Either way and always now, he's dead. Either way now and always, there's no longer any difference between who he is inside and who he is in the world outside. I'm white and so at this moment transparent. I don't want to fuck anything up, but how is it possible to feel things and never fuck anything up? The Buddhists talk a lot about skillful speech. They say, the man says a word, then the word says a word, then the word says the man, and pretty soon all the world we can't define with words stops existing. Maybe we all stop existing when it stops existing, when it intensifies until it almost becomes a face, something you could still hold, something transparent, something bullets could pass right through. I'd like to read another collaboration. This is with the artist Mel Chin, a friend of mine, dear friend of mine. And this is from a series he did where he reimagined the encyclopedia, the Funkin' Wagnall's encyclopedia from the year he was born. And he re-edited it to more reflect his reality. He visually re-edited it. And then I did a collaboration with him where we got 25 other writers to write responses to his work. So this is an excerpt from the piece that I submitted. It's called Put the Load on Me. This is how it works. The master does not bow before the slave. He does not stand naked before her robes. His hands are empty, yet he does not offer not even a cupful of his emptiness. How could he? How could the world then keep turning? He made his money, as they say, the old-fashioned way, meaning he earned it, meaning slaves, meaning go fuck yourself. A deer earlier stood by the side of the road, deciding whether or not to kill me. I cannot blame her. I cannot blame anyone. Many animals were hurt in the production of this book, just as many trees were hurt, and all the clouds. Open any book, and the cloud above you bursts into flame. You know this, and yet nothing stops you. The sky is stuck to the end of your finger as you point to it. Remember, it's not that everything has to look like something else, or even remind you of something else. Everything is something else. This is a story we've been telling ourselves since we could speak. Possess nothing, Francis says. Do good everywhere. No one believes those wings will lift you. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to Eliza next and her beautiful book.
Thank you, Nick, for that wonderful reading and visual presentation. Our next reader is Rachel Eliza Griffiths. She is a poet and visual artist. She's a recipient of fellowships, including Cave Canem, Convilio, Yaddo, and the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation. Her visual and literary work has appeared widely, including The New Yorker, The Paris Review, Tin House, and many others. In her new book, Seeing the Body, poems and photographs collide, challenging the invisible, indefinable ways mourning takes up residence in a body, both before and after life-altering loss. Eliza, please take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Greenlight Books, and thank you, Zoe, for this invitation to talk about protest with you and Nick. And more importantly, congratulations on your beautiful book. Everyone get Mezzanine, it's gorgeous. It's a very special time if you're launching a book into the world. I'm going to now share my screen. And before I share my screen, I will just tell you that I have 3 images that will just kind of play very slowly as I read 2 poems from my new book, Seeing the Body. And each of the images is an original image that I made myself. And there's only one image that I will tell you something about. I think it's better you enter the image however you are able to and how your body is able to be in that image. There is an image of a tree that has lacerations on it, and it's called a whipping tree. And this photograph of this tree I'm sharing was taken in Savannah, Georgia. And it is one of the trees that still documents the effects of slavery. And these trees bear the wounds from the whips that masters or overseers tied enslaved bodies, Black bodies, to these trees and then would whip them. And because of the instrument, it also gashed into the trees as well. So there's even a kind of eco-slavery or eco-terrorism to slavery when you see these trees. And that's all I'll say. Let's see, I'm sharing screen. So the first poem I'd like to read to you is called Myth. Myth. Here is the worship. Here is the wound. Here is the housework of our sad mothers again and again. Where is the world where a Black boy is not a wound shivering in his blue skin beneath a bullet's midnight? A mustard seed of fear soaked in blood, in the literature of blood, the Black face gasps for air. No, in the jury of blood, the Black boy's face merely insists it is a face to begin with. Where is the story that began in the ditch of religion, in the hull of a need so sick and swollen, it floated my people across its terrible waves? Who wrote the end of my brothers' lives in blood against the night sky? Against the psalm of bullets riven through our broken hearts. We are dying. We are dying. We are dying. We are dying in the name of a love so evil it can't kill us quickly enough. What do you believe? Here is the faith I never wanted. Here is a Black child who looks like night, like red dirt, like Easter morning. A Black boy who will not rise again when bullets spin away from the crypt some cop has made of his body. 7 days after my mother died, America aimed her myth at Mike Brown. Her grave was still new when I went back to be sure she was really there. I whispered his name against the barrel of August that shot through the blue clouds. America shot Mike Brown, and I can't be sorry anymore because I'm too angry, too tired, too alive to let their good myth put its hands on me and mine. In nightmares, my mother and I stand in the middle of the street, trying to rewind the blood before it leaves his body. 6 times, 6 sonnets of bullets. Why is the need so deep and dusty? A boy prays face down in the street with no prayer. Who is God to God? For hours they left a Black boy uncovered in his own death. Sleepless, I could not stop seeing my mother cradling Mike Brown in her arms. She loved Black children more than anything. Why is the need something America is pretending not to know? We know what we know. And then I will just read Whipping Tree, which is much shorter. Whipping Tree, Laurel Grove Cemetery South, Savannah, Georgia, 2018. Where are the whips and hands that risked their own history to lash lessons of blood upon Black bodies roped against these simple oaks? The marks are too high to touch now, the evidence too grotesque to scab our wailing eyes. I am trying to translate a word that glows like a chain. It is nearly God. The thick trees have grown tall beyond their unbearable childhoods. In the tree, I see which way the master snapped his wrist, turned directions, changing his mind when the body didn't scream loud enough, when the eyes of the slave refused to look away from the master she once nursed. Were there days he tired from bringing the whip across his thin freedom? And did he throw his ugly work to another man as he walked tenderly to a house he dared to call his home? The South stands in the throat of a tree. Truth is a scraped breath between glorious brown limbs. How hard was it for them to gather their blistered family into gentle arms and keep singing to Jesus. I want what flesh they hymned, every flap of skin crying and glowing red in faith. I can't look away from these unbroken trees. I am aware that we are living in the middle ring of terrorism, the trouble of scars bleeding through new maps, the tree trying alone to survive our dead names in the stripped bark. Thank you. And so now I will unshare. Here we go.
Thank you.
Is it gone back to you?
It's back.
Oh my gosh, I lost you.
Thank you, Eliza, for that luminous reading. We'll now be hearing from tonight's featured author, Zoe Hidsig. She is a poet and PhD candidate in economics at Harvard University. Her poetry has appeared in the New Yorker, London Review of Books, New York Review of Books, Paris Review, and elsewhere. Her writing about poetry has appeared in Bomb and Crit. Her new book, Mezzanine, investigates how we seek certitude, power, and domination over the natural world and one another. Zoe, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, and thank you to Eliza and Nick for those beautiful readings, and thank you for joining me here today for a conversation and readings around the idea of protest. I was thinking the lovely thing about launching a book into the world is you get to try to get some authors that you really respect and admire to come join you, and there's something sort of aspirational about it, and you can just decide who you want to be associated with for once. And Nick and Eliza are two people who I look up to immensely, and I'd love to be associated with them. My book does not have a visual element the way Eliza's and Nick's do. And if you're at all unsure of what that means, I encourage you to just buy their books because they're absolutely beautiful works of art in addition to great works of literature. So while I read, I'll just be showing some images that speak to or add another dimension to the poems I'll be reading. And then we will launch into a conversation. Okay. The first poem I'll read is called The War Gone Wrong Room. More like the maximum security playground on the street with all the riots. More hedge fund glass enclosures as if the riots were landscape with waterfall. More cross-armed supervisors with first aid kits strapped onto ankles next to pistols. More puzzling over numbers like truth. How many watering cans? And truth. How long till the color left her? And dare. Take the scent of metal off. Take Alice's hands off the monkey bars. More like playgroundless. More tangling in nets. More ropes for nets to avoid the void below. More no ground. More forts, more bows, more sterns, more ornately decorated wheels in the helm, please. More play to distract from lack of ground. More so now that Alice is no more. More over what of those supervisors? More budget cuts, more for the dollar, more for the dollar. More exotic juice in the juice boxes to trade with the bullies. More juice to burn into smoke to soot up the ceiling fan. More keypads to catch our twiddling thumbs. More casual, more indifference, mere casualties. More war gone wrong, more wounds, more soon, more keep going, don't stop, no, more, please no, more, I'm not, more, I can't be. The next poem I'll read is one called Stylized Facts. Now I can't get past the mezzanine. Never know who's waiting for me downstairs by the revolving door, covered in shields or crosses, like the blood drive. Will this be the year they finally succeed in harvesting these last self-organs, I ask, as they tell me it's for a cause? As if I'm not the swollen one, smiling on their pamphlets. Don't bother with this logic of sameness as you eye me like the platter at labor lunch. I used to envy the trees, wearing mists as veils, modest trunks exploding into thousands of muscle-bound legs soon as they reach the soil. Now even trees seem docile and susceptible. So too for the quasi-goddesses with half-lives shorter than a hair's. When we still had hair and partners, my partner shaving said hair said, we should be made of light. While every morning I wake hoping to uncover some slab of my body hollowed out and encased in steel. Everyone's entitled to her own magic bullet theory of self. There's the get to know you game we play, no longer, for we lost get to and know you. If you had to press further into the future, in what county, what province would you elect what version of what self? A half-frozen field, late January. Tall, lone turbine thrashing by the abandoned interstate. I play my game. I await the next campaign. The next poem I'll read is one from a series in Mezzanine that focus on wrongful convictions. So cases in which prisoners often spend up to several decades on death row for violent crimes that they did not commit. And I focus in Mezzanine on cases in which prisoners have been exonerated. And I think there are 5 or 6 poems in the book that are inspired by and speaking to specific cases. So this one is called Objectivity as Blanket. And it also has a lot of anaphora, but these are this one and the other one that I read first are the only 2 poems in the book that have this much repetition. So don't think that the whole book is like this. Okay, Objectivity as Blanket. Nor the police, hyenas on hearing 5 confessions, 4 false and 1 too irresistible, nor the mental health elephant tusked by the state, nor the common sense stork now in a knot, nor the shots, nor the claws unbending, nor the claws bending, nor seeing his fitful approach did one turn back to flip the window latch for the life form nearly breaking himself on glass, nor the next governor, nor the state, carriage horses trotting ever steady, blinders acute to the eye, nor the widower, how could he, puma in pull focus, nor the defense counsel, not for lack of it, nor the stork, Is she breathing? Is there such a thing as breathing here, and does it mean? The polyester, the royal blue, the blanket on the bed of the mother of two. Thank you. So that's all I'm going to read from Mezzanine. But to launch our conversation, I'm going to tell a short story, a short personal story that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And it also has an accompanying visual. So this is a painting by Robert Indiana that's very close to me. And this is one from a series of Indianas that is about major cities where major events happened during the Freedom Summer and the Civil Rights Movement. And this painting in particular highlights the city of Philadelphia, Mississippi. And the reason why I've been thinking about this a lot lately is that Philadelphia, Mississippi is where Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner were killed by the KKK during the Freedom Summer while they were registering Black folks to vote. And my next door neighbor growing up was Caroline Goodman, who was the mother of Andrew Goodman, who was killed in during the Freedom Summers. And I used to run into Caroline now and then when she was an elderly woman, and she had devoted her entire life to civil rights activism after Andrew's death. And so she was one of the first people in my life who was an example of what it meant to devote one's life to justice, really. And one of the most striking things that she ever said to me, and she's repeated this many times, this wasn't a sort of one-off, she's repeated it in interviews afterward as well. She once told me that if she had the chance to go back in time and tell her son, Andy, not to go to Mississippi, not to try to help enlist Black folks to vote, which of course would potentially have saved him from his early death at, I think, age 23 or so. She said that she wouldn't be able to tell him not to go. And that's because it would be going against everything that she believed. And to hear this amazing woman so many years after the most tragic event of her life, still able to have the moral clarity to see that justice might be more important, was one of the most sort of defining moments of my childhood, and showed me what it looked like to have a commitment to progress. So with that, I'll invite Eliza and Nick back in for a conversation about protest and our readings and our images. Nick, I think you're muted.
I was saying they were beautiful readings. Thank you, Zoe and Eliza. Yeah, and the story that you just told, it's so formative to have this neighbor who's directly connected to the Freedom Summers in such a tragic way. Thanks for telling it. It puts your book in perspective, like, you know, how you became the poet you are. You know, and to see these, I had read the last poem that you read, "Objectivity is Blanket." As you know, I had discovered it in the New Yorker. It was published in the New Yorker, right? And that Kevin Young had asked me to choose a poem from the New Yorker to read with a discussion and discuss it with him. And I went through I sort of was thumbing through their database, and I was looking for. I realized I knew almost all the poets, because poetry is a small world. I knew almost everyone. And at some point I said, well, I'm just not going to choose someone I know or someone I've even heard of. And I had never heard of you at that moment. It was about a year ago or so, not so long ago, a year or so ago. But I found this poem, "Objectivity is Blanket," and I was just really blown away by it. I I had no sense of what it was about, but I sensed, like I've just read the note now in the back of the book, because I didn't have the book at that time. I only had the New Yorker. And I read the note at the back of the book, response to the trial of Earl Washington, who spent more than 17 years in prison in Virginia, many of them on death row for a crime he did not commit. He was exonerated by the DNA testing in 2001 through a biological sample found on a blanket at the crime scene. And I didn't need to know that. Like, I mean, I'm really glad I know it now, but I didn't need to know it to really respond to the poem. Like, I really got this sense of what it's like to live in the world at this moment, to have this moment where there is these forces, and all of it's interesting. All three of us wrote these books before the moment we're in right now, yet they're all feel like they're speaking to that moment. So I just wanted to say that. I feel like I've been talking enough, so I just want to start out with that and say beautiful and thank you.
No, I will chime in and just to say, you know, but to you both, we've been talking and in conversation with each other. And Zoe, it's been so great to be in conversation with you and to kind of go forward with you and get to know your work and you. And so thank you for that. And Nick, it's always a conversation, so thank you. But I was thinking so much about the last image that you shared with Mississippi because, and I think we were saying something about this, that like the image, the self-portrait that I shared with everyone this evening was made in Mississippi. It was made in Gloucester, Mississippi in 2015. So this was like a long time ago, but it wasn't. But I made this image after Sandra Bland was killed. And just before her in June, the Charleston Nine, the Charleston Nine, the people who were killed in church by Dylan Roof, who was later driven by the police past Burger King, where he was given a hamburger on his way to be, I guess, processed. But just thinking of that night and to make an image, right? And I guess I'm going to open it up and talk about like to make an image through language, because Nick, like looking again through Stay, which I've been spending so much time with, and I love it. It's like, you know, you're almost doing a echoing or something, because you have images on top of the language, underneath the language, inside, and then also Zoe, you as well are usually like, you know, it's like the language becomes this vessel or shape. And I know for me in the moment of making that self-portrait, the physical frustration I felt where I'm up in the middle of the night driving around a small rural town in Mississippi, where I see an American flag with this light shining on it, and it's near these old railroad tracks. And I was there for hours, leaping, jumping, pouring with sweat, because I couldn't cry and I couldn't scream. But I just thought I thought of this kind of African proverb of flying black people who could fly. And so some of that is also in the image of trying to leave the space of America for some kind of justice, justice for Sandra Bland, for the Charleston Nine. And here we are in 2020, still having to demand and resist and protest. And so those are some of the things I was thinking about as we prepared to come together today, and also just to share our images and to talk about, you know, poetry and the act of protest and the image of protest, right? And the imagination of protest, like what is that? So I don't know how we are on time, because I was so engrossed in listening, but how y'all feeling? Like,
Yeah.
Zoe.
Oh, sorry.
I'll let you talk, Zoe. Yeah.
Well, I'll just say, Eliza, I love those photographs so much that you showed. They're unbelievably moving. And I love what you said about the tree, this which is a body, right? And in some ways, that was a moment where I was thinking about what language is. And like in so many ways, language is a set of symbols that we carve, or in other ways, ink onto surfaces, right? And so to me, that was like and I didn't think of this when I saw that image first a few days ago, but just when you were speaking now, it all sort of came together that like photography actually can be this vessel that is very much like writing. Mm-hmm. When the subject matter is history and bodies meeting the natural world, and what we see there is the human making its mark through a kind of language that signifies so much going back in time. I thought that photograph was just amazing, and I love your description of the leaping photograph, which that self-portrait. And I was so curious, and this is a bit of a like process question, but I'm curious about this with you as well, Nick, to what extent you sort of think about, you know what you're going for when you start something. Because that story, Eliza, sounded like you were driving around, maybe had your camera, maybe were thinking about making something, you knew you had to. Did you know what that photograph would end up looking like?
No. I had no idea what it was going to be. And at first I thought, oh, it's kind of hokey if I'm just standing there, or if I just take a picture of it alone. And I think this other thing happened, the disconnect, and how ungrounded I felt from such a visual symbol to look at it and think Black people can't even pray without being shot down like nothing. And to also think about Sandra Bland while I was in Mississippi, and I'll be really quick, I got pulled over by the police. Wow. And the terror that went through me on this backcountry road, I'm looking to see, do not make this man, if this man asks you to get out of this car, can you run? I'm looking at ditches, I start recording, and then that's the thing is protest too, right? Like what's happening now is that there's a population, Black population, others who can film and record and take a photograph. What is terrible is that that is what's necessary for people to now engage and say, well, maybe it's too brutal now because we can see it. If I tell you someone's brutalized me, they brutalized me. I mean, it's you know, and not to make a connection with this country's memory and history, but now here's the proof because we all can see it and the camera doesn't lie. But I mean, it's all of that kind of thing. And so the empowerment that a lot of people are having to suddenly, I'm filming you, like I'm not the object or subject now, you are. There's something really complex and nuanced and interesting about that to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this moment of protest is it's hard to exactly put one's finger on what the tipping point was, like how this is the moment after all these other moments. I mean, there's some things that sort of seem obvious, like from that video, that particular video. I mean, but even since then, there's been, you know, how many Black folks have been shot since that video? It's kind of it's shocking. Just last night in Atlanta, right? Like, but it does feel like it's something turned with that video. There's something about that which is, you know, horrible and a gift, that like the whole world could see that and see the same thing. And it does feel like, in a way, we just went through this moment, this long period of you know, COVID and isolation, and sort of the largest cooperative effort in human history, you know, trying to save the species, of, you know, just sort of doing nothing, you know, trying to isolate and self distance. And now this is like, we're doing another, like the largest action in history, which is another cooperative thing, like all over the world. Like people are suddenly saying, like, yeah, why is it like this? You know, why is there this police carceral state that has existed for so long, and let's just stop it. Let's just change it, which I think is like, you know, will be, you know, it's going to be a long trip to do that, but it's so like ready. It's so the time. It seems like it's reached that tipping point. So,
right.
Yeah.
And yeah, and something that Eliza and I have talked about a little bit is to think about, you know, what else can we recognize as, you know, what else can we recognize in this moment as being uniquely suited to rewiring how we deal with things. And, you know, we're better at dealing with things that are visible and things that we can see. And in some sense, I think the like massive response to COVID was, you know, successful to an extent, because finally we found an image that communicated what the epidemiologists were saying. And that image was to flatten the curve, right? Like, it took a long time for people to understand what we needed to do, and to finally see how overwhelmed the health system could become, and how disastrous it could be, how exponential, how steep the exponential curve could get, was what allowed us to respond in some massive collective way. And so I think also about the ways in which, like, climate change too needs to have this reckoning. And that's something that's not visible in the same ways to a lot of people. And, you know, just as we've lost 115,000 people in the US to COVID in the last few months, the conservative estimates say that we lose about 150,000 people worldwide from direct climate change disasters. And so what do we do to wake up to all of these things at once? And how can we see how all these different forms of state violence are sort of intertwined and sort of thrumming with the same engine in some sense?
Right. And also, I mean, I have to say, it's that for me personally, even within, you know, flatten the curve, and COVID, the collective still neglected and kind of excluded Black lives. You know, out of the numbers in this country, most of the numbers are Black and Brown communities who have had the most loss. And so I think, you know, the image of that paired with the image of a man kneeling on another man's neck, flatten the curve, it's like real, it just is so horrifying. And to look at a physical tree, I mean, trees, I'm always writing about trees, I photograph trees, I have a strong like love for trees, but that I can see where a whip dug into a tree, and imagine a body tied around that tree and it went through both of them. And I can still see that in 2018 from like the 1800s or whatever. I mean, we should, shame on us. It's absolutely awful. I don't know. I mean, each day has its own terms, it feels like. And as Nick, as you were saying, we've got a lot of work to do. There's a ways to go. This is a long, long trip. And who knows where we'll be in this journey, because it's going to go on beyond us. And I think of the tree again, that the tree has grown as such that the marks on the tree are too high for me to physically touch. And that brings me a lot of hope. I feel that that the tree will continue to grow and no one will see those marks. I don't know. Do you think we should do questions or open it up in a bit? Or wait, is Chelsea gonna tell us? Hi.
Yeah,
Speaking of you, Chelsea.
got a couple questions here we can start out with. Let's see, the first one is for Nick and Rachel Eliza. First, David Solo says, terrific readings. And he asks if both of you could talk more about how you approach combining and pairing your text and images. Do you start with one or the other, make both to realize ideas, etc.? What do you think makes a successful or effective pairing?
Well, I could say something. I just want to say something about Zoe too, to include her in that question, just because like I find her poems, your poems, Zoe, to be so cinematic. To really like, I really feel I'm in the midst of something. And it's cinema in a very strange way, like that objectivity is blanket poem that you read. Just the negation, how the entire poem is based on negation as it goes through it. Yet everything is like this. You're just moving through a world. I find it very visual also. So I think a lot of poets do that naturally. They you know, we take images and you know, figure out a way to transform them into language, into this abstraction of language. and you know, Eliza and I maybe do it like, you know, we have other practices that bring that in also. You know, I do certain visual stuff, but I end up working mostly with other artists, and the artists that I work with are artists, people that I like. I end up just working with, even if I haven't liked them before, like, or people that I love. Eliza's in that book Stay. We did a collaboration together. It just, you know, it came out of conversations and just uh, knowing each other and sort of having long talks, and then at some point just be like, oh, we should do something together. And then it was very easy to do because we already knew each other so well. So I don't know if that answers David's thing. It's more like organic, I think, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it's usually the way I work with images is more organic. I'll just say that.
Yeah, what I'll say very briefly, and I'll say, you know, with seeing the body, my initial impulse was not to have images or photographs in it, and it changed because as I started to do the work of language, I realized my visual self or my visual voice or my visual language was critical to the like what was at stake for the book. But in the section in the book where there are photographs, I don't have any language. I don't have dates. I don't have any, it's just the image, and it's just the space. It depends on what project I'm working on. Like, most of the time, sometimes I'm very deliberate, like, here's the image, here's text. But sometimes I will have an image in mind or something I want to make or I see, and I might want to do like a visual call and response, and then say, well, what if I tried to articulate this and use like language and see what happens? It really depends on what it is. Like, if I do collaborations with people, it's usually visually more so than language. And I don't know why that is, but I like Nick, to echo Nick, and to also echo what Nick was saying about Zoe's, about her writing as well, her poetry. It's very organic for me. If I'm taking a picture or a portrait of someone else, that's obviously a different thing. But in these self-portraits, they happened. I never was like, I'm going to have a book and these will be in it. I was deeply, deeply, deeply grieving and thought, you know, I'm going to disappear. Maybe I should make a record. So it came from a place of grief, those images.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, there's probably, for each poem that ended up in this book, there are probably 3 or 4 different visual pieces that I could point to, whether it's a film or a painting I love or a sculpture I love, and I could be like, oh, actually this poem is about that, you know? Mm-hmm. But of course that's not useful to anyone because that's just what goes on in our head, and we take little pieces from other people all the time, and recombine it in our own way and create something new. And it rarely feels sort of like I have any idea of what's actually going on while it's happening.
Miles Hewitt has a question for all 3 poets. The poetry reading via screen feels like a novel form, and I'm glad we've gotten to see your visual textual work up close in a way that we might not have at an in-person reading. What are some other ways your creative practices and ideas about your poetry have changed during quarantine? Has it been generative, stifling, etc.?
Zoe, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, something that I've been thinking about is how this format, like, it's already, and I think what Miles is saying is that in some sense this format is already ekphrastic. Like, you are seeing an image of us, and we've thought about what we're putting behind us, and we've thought about how we're presenting ourselves in a box, basically. And so I think what I loved about this reading was that we were kind of just leaning into that in a sense, and just saying, well, let's really do this. Let's really make this a 2-dimensional show, because that's where we are. But try to push the dimensions in some sense. Yeah, and whether about creativity in quarantine, maybe Nick and Eliza want to talk about that.
I could say something about it. I've been remarkably uncreative during quarantine. I'm very happy to hear people that have been very active in writing. That when Corona first hit, like I was very, my mind was very unsettled, and then with the recent protests, it's just another level of it. It's not, to me, it's not like a writing time. It's a different time right now. A time to be sort of, I feel like I'm like hyper vigilant, and just really trying to be aware and to be in the world and not to be uh, transforming it into poetry at the moment. I've been reading a lot of poetry, and I appreciate people that are able to write during this, but I'm just not one of them. So, and I allow myself that. I don't um, I don't feel bad about that at all. So just like I, this is a time, yeah. Just sort of, I'm trying to. There's so many things happening and so many things to know at this moment that I'm just trying to like be present to that. Really.
Mhm. And I'll just add, I mean, I do make things, but it's very different. I don't have access to my studio. So I'm sitting like right now in like my makeshift photo thing with some cloth taped to the wall, and sometimes I'll make one picture or one thing or something. Um, I tend to be someone who makes a thing every day, but it's sounding much grander than it is. Like if I make dinner, that's a thing. Like if I make time to sit and read, or I make a drawing or something, that's still an action. If I make time to call my friends and my dad and my sister, that's an action. And it's all coming through me, like making time to both plug in and then unplug. I think for Zoe and I am particular right now to launch a book during this time, and then try to still do something creative. It's like, wow, it's a big hive of things. I'm not trying to make anything precious right now. I take my Polaroid camera out sometimes when I walk the dog, and I'll take a picture or something like that. But it's very different than how I might usually have a schedule in my studio or be working. It's just very different. I do some writing. I was impressed with people doing these COVID diaries. I'm like, wow, like these people have got it together. But I'm going with the flow. I'm kind of like, if I feel like making something, I make it. And I just listen. I think I'm listening.
It seems to me this next question bounces excellently off of Eliza and Nick's answers to that last question. Michael Rosen asks, wondering if you can speak on your thoughts about taking up space with art at a time like this, specifically in relation to various forms of privilege, be it racial, economic, gender, or otherwise.
I'll say something very briefly, which is that I feel like I have every right to take up space, and the long-lasting war on Black women in particular in this country makes me feel that I almost feel like it's not a privilege. It's like my survival. It's always been my survival. If I couldn't make my art, I wouldn't be here. And I know that. And so my action to me feels radical to say that I'm a Black artist. I'm an artist. I'm a woman. I'm making art. This is my way of protesting in some way, is to not center certain kinds of conversations or what people want me to do or be, or police me in any way. And I don't want to do that to anybody else. So I don't feel any guilt or any residue or anything. Like if anything, I'm just getting started on making things. I'm going to make a lot more things. And if I'm lucky, people will find them interesting. I will. And that's what matters to me. Thank you for that question. It's really good.
And I would just, yeah, I love Eliza's answer, and I would just say that I think there's enough space. I think there's enough space for art and for protest and for action and for people are synthesizing this moment in different ways, and there's many ways into this moment. And I think all of them are valid. Whatever way you find to get into this moment, I think is very, very valid. As long as we keep moving in the right direction, I think it'll be a good thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with Nick's answer, and thank you for that question. I think we're all grappling with it in our own ways, and I think that sort of in line with what Nick said, there always has to be a sort of chorus, and of course, as time goes on, you know, I think a lot of the times I think in a 100-200 year time span, and we sort of need to have some kind of a record of what was going on at this moment. And you know, that doesn't mean that, you know, my particular poetry book needs to be taking center stage right now, but I believe it can continue quietly in the shadows, and in the shadows of what's going on, to bear witness from different perspectives and lash out as appropriate. And sort of what comes together in the end is a kind of chorus that also will continue to serve as a record of the time.
Thank you.
I like that.
So yeah.
I do
we have
too.
we have a few minutes left, so these last three are all kind of similar in a way. I'm going to combine them together. First, Leah Epstein sort of echoes you all in saying poetry seems an excellent form of protest. She says she's a poetry reader, and I'm often asked this question and is curious how you all would approach it. Why read poetry? An anonymous attendee similarly asks whose work has been grounding you lately. And Linda asks, at what point in your life did you discover poetry as a creative outlet? Who or what inspired you? Sort of why read poetry, who inspires you, and sort of why write poetry?
I can start with something. So one of the poets who really showed me what poetry can do is the Polish poet Zbigniew Herbert. And I've been thinking about Herbert a lot lately. He was writing under Stalin and kept most of his, since he refused to write in the Stalin style that was deemed appropriate, he kept many of his poems in a drawer while he was writing and just refused to publish. But, you know, he kept writing, and, you know, maybe he wasn't doing Zoom events to promote his book during that time.
Lucky.
But he was writing, and his poems bear witness to a time of horror in his own country, and he's a moralist. And when I read his poems, I understand what humanity has to overcome in order to live together. And like that's really the central, I mean, preoccupation in both my academic life and in my poetry work, is like, what do we have to do to figure out a way to live together? And to me, Herbert is a poet who captures so beautifully this wide range of difficulties and what we have overcome and what can give us hope carrying into the future. And so to me, poetry offers that. To answer Leah's piece of that question, why poetry? It gives that space. It creates a space to contemplate what we are capable of overcoming in order to reorganize ourselves in a way that doesn't oppress.
I could say that's beautiful. I was thinking of Adorno too when he said to write poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric. But he changed that 20 years later. He revised himself 20 years later, which a lot of people don't remember, and said that what he meant was that he meant that it's barbaric to do it, but it's necessary, that you have to do it. That it's a necessary thing to do. It's the act itself is barbaric. It's a terrible thing to do, to try to take something so difficult and transform it in some way. But he said he always meant it to be utterly necessary, a necessary act. And as for folks I'm reading right now, I mean, you know, most recently I've been reading Zoe Hitzig's new book, and I'm reading Eliza Griffiths' new book, which have really helped me a lot. And Rachel Eliza, her last event she gave an amazing list of what she was reading that I'll just sort of leave it to her, but a lot of Cave Canem poets. And to try to imagine what the world would be like if Cave Canem wasn't with us right now is really hard to imagine. And I completely believe that what's come out of Cave Canem has led to this moment of possibility because it's a really beautiful movement. Y'all know about black writing, black poets writing through this group Cave Canem. So Eliza, you can sort of.
Yeah, I really loved what you said, Zoe. I was like, wow, that's it. Like what she said. Like, and I love Herbert. I really do. I haven't been able to. I've been picking through Moby Dick because Nick, I know you're reading that. But I really have a weird kind of thing of having like many books around me. Even now, I wouldn't dare show what this desk looks like, but I just kind of go in this kind of intuitive space right now. I mean, I'm always reading Lucille Clifton, many of the, as you mentioned, Cave Canem collective, but I'm even going back before them now to like the Black arts movement to see, what that time was, and looking at, Etheridge Knight, looking at, Amiri Baraka and, Gil Scott-Heron, just different kind of poetic, what the poets were after during upheaval, during like what demands were made on them, and the demands made on language. But I've kind of been all over the place with my reading right now. I too am enjoying Zoe Hitzig's new book, Mezzanine, and Stay is Gorgeous, of course. But some part of the question I think that Chelsea asked, I was a poet since I was like 4 or 5 years old. So I always wanted to be an artist. I didn't want to be anything else but an artist. And so, being in this stage now, I still feel the same, if not much, much even more so now. But I don't know, I'm probably all over the place with the actual answer to what was asked. But I'm reading a lot of different genres and formats to photo essays, lyrical essays with images, prose. I'm always looking at Clarice Lispector's work. Today on LitHub, you can go check out Camille Dungy. She's got a fantastic searing poem up on LitHub. You can go check that out and be blown away. There's just a lot going on. I'm honored to be walking beside these poets, next to them on the path right now. The story of what's happening with language and art in this country and globally is really important and really necessary. So I think that's what I got.
I think between the three of us, we sort of answered the 3 questions.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for tonight's wonderful conversation, reading, and visual presentation. It was gorgeous. A reminder to everyone that tonight's event has been recorded, so in case you missed any part of it or know others who had to miss it, keep an eye out on our website and YouTube channel for that later on. Also a reminder that you can buy Stay, Seeing the Body, and Mezzanine through greenlightbookstore.com and any of the poet's other works. You can get 15% off these 3 featured books as well through June 22nd if you use code 3, the number, not spelled out, poets. And you can also find that code in the chat. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here tonight and holding space for this conversation. Have a great rest of your evening.